Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to see how to make the groovy techno of Alarico. So for this track I've been referencing with this track Carnal Fever. We're gonna cover lots of techniques and different specificities from this genre, and as usual you can get the project file in the link in the description to follow along the tutorial. Alright, here we go. Alright, so we're gonna see how to make the kick first. So I have lots of things going on in my kick group. So I think in his tracks, Alarico is using lots of kicks coming from drum machines like 909s, and his kicks are usually like very subby and it's very round. There's not much frequencies in the mid and high range, and this is what we're going to apply to our processing to do this kind of kick. So first, let's see the punch. So for the punch, I'm taking a 909 sample, something that's already a bit punchy. What I'm gonna do here is really withdrawing those frequencies that are in the mid-range. So I don't want here this boxiness, and I'm gonna make sure I have a very subby punch that's really in the low end, and I can also highlight a bit the high end if I want to keep it. I'm just gonna distort a bit the high end to beef it up. I make sure my bass is in mono. Then I boost it a bit, like compression and distortion from the drum bus. It's really like beefing it up. Then a few EQs. I add a bit of that resonance here. And also here. With that, I have my punch, and I'm gonna add lots of layers after this to kind of give some texture, some movement in the low end, also some toms, sine wave, and so on. So here is just a texture for my kick. So actually it's some noise. So to do this kind of noise, I'm using an impact. Also, I've used the Valhalla Supermassive. So this is the impact, and I have like filtered it. So I really have like the high end. I put a bit of movement with that Supermassive plugin and the Gemini mode. Some erosion to give a bit more texture. And then I'm just isolating the noise. Then I have some perk. So here the pattern is pretty simple. It's just a note like this. This is a perk, and I make sure it's really in the mid-range. I don't want the high end. I want something that's narrow and that's very dark. So what I do is putting that EQ first, then bringing a bit more movement and texture, either with the delay or with the reverb. Here's just to cut out the clipping with this one, and then just sidechaining with the compressor here. I have another layer that kind of answers this. So here just a tom, and I apply exactly the same thing, no difference. So what you're going to see a lot in this tutorial is some call and answer games. So either for the lead, either for the mid groove, for the high end. This is really something that's the most important in this style. And everything will be very narrow with these kind of EQs, so that it feels like something very dark. So either the different parts, elements are narrow and dark. Either I have something very bright, and this is what we're going to see after with the drums. Usually the drums are in the high end, and they are really put forward like it's almost a lead. And there are lots of plates reverb, so it's really something that's very bright that we're going to apply. So either you can use, for instance, this preset from Ableton. Either I'm going to use you'll see some Valhalla Vintage with some bright O. That's kind of a plate reverb, and this really brings that crispy high end to the drums. So just getting back to my kick group. So I have also this sine wave that's going to make and create a movement for my sub. So what I did here is just taking a sine wave from Serum and then just I distort a little bit, putting a bit of room with that reverb and that delay and sidechaining, of course. Then I have my rumble. So for the rumble, I have lots of different elements. So I have this first rumble that's very in the low end. So to do that, I take a kick, I put a convolution reverb 100%, I put the amp in blues, in mono, and here I EQ heavily because I really want just a subby part of it. You see with the sine wave, I have more movement. I also add the kick, the 909 kick, and I bring even more movement with some kind of perk. So it's just a little pattern like this, and what I use is this tool. It's from All You Need Is Live. Basically, it's just a delay, and it brings movement to your perks. And I EQ heavily because I want something really in the low end. I also bring back some noise. So here I'm just using a perk and isolating some EQs in the low end, and I'm using the grain delay. Grain delay is a very useful tool. So you see without it, it's just a perk with lots of delay and reverb. And then I can pitch it down and I get some kind of textures like this. I have also another reverb. So I'm using this subverb, which is from Ableton, a sample from Ableton. And it brings something more to the rumble. So this one was very subby and very tonal because I have this note, this sub note. This one is more atonal. And it's really like a mass of noise in the low end. And this really brings something more to the rumble. And all of this together, it's like lots of movement. The sine wave. So yeah, you can see that I use lots of delays. I EQ a lot, all of these elements. So I really create something that's moving here. Everything must be sidechain, of course. So I want my punch and then everything comes back with the rumble, with the sine wave, the tom, and so on. All together, it's just a bit of EQ and this is my my final kick. So you can also use this erosion thing to add also some noise. So I feel like in some of Alarico's track, he's using that tool. We can hear it. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this kick group. To add a bit more ambience, I have also a few elements here. So I have this loop. So this is just a breakbeat loop. And I EQ everything so that I want only the mids. I put my room that I will use for all the elements and then just sidechaining. And I did also this noise. So for this noise, I think I've been using this loop. And so it's just a random loop, but I apply lots of grain delay. And you can create these kind of textures. And then recorded it, and I took only the part that I wanted, and I actually applied other grain delays. And I have something like this that's moving and that creates an atmosphere. And yeah, that's it for the kick and the ambience for the kick. All right, so then I have my drums. So for the drums, I just told you, this is lots of bright drums. All of these drums are basically taken from drum machines. It's 909s, close hats or hi-hats or whatever. I'm first introducing the track with some very bright hi-hats like this. So this one is more like for the ambience. There's lots of delay. And this one is more straightforward. So it's really like a call and answer with the kick in the offbeat. So here I'm just using like a standard closed hi-hat from 909. I'm applying some amp that brings a bit of noise. Then I'm distorting, beefing it up with the drum bass. Also getting the transient less harsh. Then it's really about this reverb. So it's a plate. You see it's very bright and it really brings that room and that crispiness to the hi-hat. But of course I had lots of high-end here. It was too harsh, so I have to withdraw this. And then I'm applying this groove delay. So there's actually a groove preset in Ableton, and there's actually like two, I guess. Yeah, the 8th groove and groove. And you can apply this to basically all your channels when you're doing groove. And this really brings some ghost notes and some room to your elements. You see? And I'm gonna apply this to lots of drums. So for this one, it's just a different pattern. And applying the same amp, just this time I'm using the echo, and I have actually like another delay here. I have the same bright reverb, and yeah, this is the first drums I have, and then I have another open hat. So this one is almost like a shaker, kind of emphasize this open hat at that point in the track. So I think he does this often, and especially in the reference track. So I have this solo open hat, and then another one is coming, and it's boosting the other one. And I'm using the same processing, so the amp, the drum bass, the same reverb, it's a plate, the 8th groove, and then again some EQing. I have some sidechain also on the group. Then I have another hi-hat. So this one is more like a hi-hat, very noisy. So I think I've used again an impact, and I'm just taking like that bit of noise. Taking the vocoder, also it's a great tool to bring some noise to your hi-hats or to any kind of element, and applying the same bright all reverb and then EQing. And finally at some point I have another hi-hat, this time it's a loop. So I've chosen it for the high-end part of it. I applied the same reverb, and this really brings also this movement and this very high end. And here what I do is I EQ, and like a lot of time when I EQ I have to take care of the very high end above 10K, and usually around 4K you get some resonances. So it's interesting to try to cut these areas in the frequency spectrum. And yeah, just the EQ to take only the high end and some sidechain, and this is my drums. So next I have a clap. So for this clap I'm using a 909 basic clap. I'm using an arpeggiator. So it was just easier than to have this kind of rhythm. Then put some random MIDI pattern, just trying some different rhythms. So it wasn't like a classic clap that's put like a snare. It's more like random pattern, but still repeating itself. And yeah, it brings that vibe. And especially if you want the vibe, you need that reverb also. This time I've chosen a more classic reverb because it was too much with the bright one. And it kind of brings something different. Again, almost as if the clap is a kind of lead in this track. I then have a perk. So I took a random percussion sample, again, just drawing down some MIDI pattern, trying some different patterns. And then applying the same thing. So here it's really the groove, delay, some sidechain, EQing, And here I wanted something that was wide because I had already lots of things going on in the frequency spectrum, either in the kick group or with the lead. So here it's more like an ambience thing in the background with the delay, and with that width, we can hear it better. So then I have this vocal. So here what brings life to this vocal is this reverb. So to be it more clean, I bring the reverb slowly because I don't want the full reverb here because it would be a bit too much, a bit of a mess. So that's why I'm using this automation, and then I'm just EQing so that's less harsh. And here it was really like super resonating in that range. And yeah, here it's all about the sample selection. So I found this breathing vocal that suits to the track and bring some dark energy to it. I also have this kind of Atmo, and the goal of this is to bring some intensity for this kind of drop here. So it's not really like a hard techno drop, but it's really bringing the intensity with this and with the sweeps and the impacts that I have here. And all together, then it releases. And so to do this Atmo, what you can do is just take like a random vocal. So you see this one was a bit nasty, not very nice to hear at first, but then you put like huge reverb, so 100%. There's also some movement thanks to the delay. And then, since there were lots of nasty resonances, I have to really tame them down. So it's not too nasty. So here it's really about trying, finding those resonances, cutting them, bringing them back to see what's better. And then just using that auto filter to bring that intensity up until the drop. And so yeah, I'm using those sweeping impacts, and also I'm using the sweeping impacts for the release. So here just making sure it's sidechain. I don't want the lows also. So then I have my lead. So for the lead, what I did is this kind of call and answer between a low perk and a stab. So again, some call and answer, it's really used a lot in this style. So I've chosen this stab. It's more like a dubby kind of stab. It's FM stab. So it's not the most close to what Alarico is using in his track. But I tried this and I think it's quite fitting the track and it was quite good, so I kept it. I think in Carnal Fever it's more using like a low perk. It's only like perks, so there's less harmonics in his lead. So I took a stab, so you can take any FM chords or synths or whatever, and then I'm applying the same principle. So a bit of delay, some reverb, to have something full and hairy. And then I just did lots of EQs to get something narrow, because at first it was a bit too bright. Also I have lots of lows. So here I make sure the high end is tamed down, it's dark, dull, and a bit narrow. And this is what I want for this kind of nostalgic, melancholic track. And here for the low perk, I'm using the same processing. And then just trying different pitch by transposing down to see what fits better with the track that's respond to the stab. And that's it for the lead. So regarding the lead, I also did this FM synth. I didn't keep it, but it was an alternative sound to the lead that I had here. So I think in some of its tracks, Alarico is using lots of FM kind of synths. So I'm using here that FM synth from Serum. This is just a pluck that's played with some reverb, that envelope, the filter, and there's a bit of FM synthesis here. And then apply the groove delay and a bit of distortion, and I get this sound. And if I want it to be more weird and dissonant, I can add the same thing, but this time I'm just pitching it up by 6 semitones. So here I have this one and here this one, and it's +6 between the two. And it's a good way to get this dissonant sound. So you can also use the chord tool for your MIDI and just put like a +6 and play around with that synth. You can also create some interesting patterns. So here I've used the same pattern as my lead, but you can also use this ML sequencer and create some really interesting patterns. And you can also play with some polyrhythms. So for instance, you can put 5 and it's going to change constantly with the key. So yeah, really hypnotic techno and groove. The sequencer, the random sequencer is really useful to find some patterns for your leads. So I wanted to show you that. And finally, I have a few effects in the background. So for my effects, I have used a lot the grain delay. And I think this is actually the best tool to do this kind of weird sound that you can find in Alarico or Schleyer tracks or whatever. So you can take random samples, or you can choose carefully your sample. So for this time, this example, I've used like an elephant sample. But I have pitched it down like a lot. So I think at first it was this. So it was an elephant sound. And what I did is warping it like the maximum, like stretching it to the maximum. So at first it was like this. I stretch it to the maximum. And then I pitch it down a lot. Like I think it was this. And just by using those pitch and warp, so you can re-warp, re-pitch, use different warp modes, you can create some weird sound and textures. And on top of that, you can use some grain delays to get some even more weird sounds. So depending if you want something more in the high end or in the low end, you can here bring down the frequency or the pitch, and you will get some interesting textures or weird sound. And then just putting it into the room with that reverb and the sidechain to make sure it doesn't interfere with the kick. I did the same for this effect, but this time I took the same sample that I've put in the granulator, and the granulator is going to take a little part of that sample and play it. You can also use that FM sound to create some even more weird texture. And I've applied also the same thing, so grain delay and a reverb, and then sidechaining. And to add a bit more like differences in the sounds that I play, you can play different pitch. So here I'm alternating between the high pitch and low pitch in the track. And I think I did also this with that weird effects. So again, I take a random effect, just putting lots of grain delays, and you can get those kind of textures. So I have even 3 grain delays. You can put 4, 5, 10 or whatever. You get even more crazier sound. And again, to have some variation in what plays, I've used this LFO, and I've linked the frequency to the modulation here of the grain delay, so that this frequency is moving and the pitch is moving around with the track. So it's not exactly the same sound that is played each time, but it's something in a range that you can decide here. So you still get something coherent, you get different sounds, and it's less repetitive. And I did the same here, but with a different effect. And you can also pitch it down, pitch it up to get different sounds and effects to your track. Also use roar here, so it brings also some kind of weirdness here. It's resonating with that fractal shaper. So yeah, there's lots of tools, and if you combine all of the different techniques, you can get even more weird sounds. So you can use the granulator, the grain delay, you can use some frequency modulation, you can pitch down, pitch up, you can take strange samples like an elephant noise. And with that, you can play around and get some very interesting sounds. All right, so that's it for this track, guys. I hope you liked it. Thank you so much for the support, and I'll see you in the next one.